Hi, my name is Trish Simitakos, and I am the 2020 president of the Greater Washington, D.C. chapter of NACE, and the owner of Trish Star Events, an event planning company based locally. I want to first start by thanking all of our NACE members and partners for your patience, concern, and true professionalism over the last couple of weeks. This is an unprecedented time in our industry, and there isn't a single person who hasn't been affected. As many of you know, we have scheduled an in-person panel discussion to discuss the effects of COVID-19 on the industry. And that was to be held tonight at the Bolger Center located in Potomac, Maryland. Given the course of events over the last few days, we decided to cancel the panel and release an online panel discussion instead. We feel that accessibility to this information is key at this point in time and remain committed to providing as many people access as is possible. So there will not be any sort of registration for this webinar. If you have the link, you can access the information. Through the sponsorship of the Hotel of the University of Maryland and the generosity of our speakers, joining me today will be David Adler, chairman and founder of BizBash, who will be our moderator, Jeff Brainerd, VP of Sales and Marketing for Southern Management Hospitality, and Colleen Hendricks, who is the Director of Events for the Howard Theater. And now, leading the discussion is David Adler.
Welcome, everybody. I know this is a really challenging time. It reminds me of a little bit of 9/11, but this is more intense than anything that I've experienced in my life. And before we get into sort of the meat of what we're going to talk about, I'd like to get from everyone, what are they feeling right now? This is personal. Our lives are in danger. We're not just dealing with an economic issue. Let's just go around the horn. Who wants to start?
I'm happy to start.
Okay, Colleen.
Hi, I'm Colleen Hendricks. I'm the Director of Sales for the Howard Theater. And as you were saying, David, I appreciate that. I mean, we're definitely seeing something we've never seen before in our industry and feeling feelings of just total shock and confusion across the board. I mean, my heart goes out to every one of my colleagues in the industry that's been affected, are getting phone calls and emails daily, hourly of job losses and business losses, and how do we pick ourselves up from here? And I think the biggest challenge is like feeling the support from each other and getting the community together and seeing how we can rally against this, and understanding that it is a temporary issue and that we're going to come back in this field bigger and better, hopefully sooner than later, but kind of really just being there for each other right now.
Jeff Brainerd, Vice President of Sales and Marketing with Southern Management Hospitality. We've got properties in Maryland and Pennsylvania. And I think that Colleen said it, best, it's a wide-ranging problem. It isn't just our teams. It isn't just the business is suffering. It's across the board. It's when you go home where you can't find things at the store, or you can't go to a store or a restaurant. You see just the impact of everything that's happening. So it doesn't turn off when you get home. It's a 24/7 thing, very similar to 9/11, as you said at the beginning, David. But there was a camaraderie after 9/11 that's missing now, because we can't get together in groups, which for hospitality professionals is that much more challenging, because that's kind of what we live for. And the whole shelter in place or distance runs counter to, I think, everybody in this panel and probably everybody watching the panel, because that's not why we're in this business. So like Colleen, I think it is temporary. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. We just don't know, what that light is yet. So it's has some very similar things as ones we've gone through in the past, but a little different because we don't know the time yet.
How do you cope with the news? I have found that I've turned it off. What do you have? If you're listening to it all the time, it makes you completely insane.
Personally, I look at it in the morning and I look at it at night for big updates, and throughout the day I segment everything so that I'm pulling out the updates that I need to operate, but I know the news isn't going to get better for a while, so I'm focusing right now on things that I need to use to communicate with our team, specifically depending on the location, what's going on in Pennsylvania, what's going on in Michigan, what's going in Maryland, what's going on in DC, and working with them at that information that's usable. The other stuff right now is noise. I'm washing my hands, I'm doing the sanitizer, I'm keeping my distance, but then focusing on what we need to do on the business to try and compartmentalize it.
Explain to everybody what you're, like, the number of people that you have that you're dealing with, and sort of the scope of the issues that are hitting you, and then we'll get to Trish on feelings. It's kind of wide ranging as far as the number of people. For my particular role, I'm working with sales teams, I'm working with the operation leaders, and then clients as well. So from a few dozen specific sales team members spread over 4 properties in a couple of states to several hundred clients and literally now thousands of guests. So it's handling those communications and making sure that we're speaking from one voice, being consistent, being respectful, but also understanding that everybody is dealing with this a little bit differently. So there isn't a perfect way to respond to everybody. It's the way you speak from the heart, you speak honestly, you speak directly, and you say, I don't know when I don't know, and you try and follow up with the answers. So the toughest thing is what we don't know, and dealing with those different constituencies. It really is being the same thing. We have generally the same information. How we process it and go forward, it's pulling those nuggets out for our clients, pulling those nuggets out for our team members, and putting that message together to convey some confidence. Trish, how are you doing? What's your life like today?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting last couple of weeks, right? Because I went into March really at the height of my event season. So it was, it started with dealing with clients. Then I was out at Cater Source, a special event last week. I ended my week in LA to visit family, and then I'm back here. And all throughout that time, I've had client phone calls and board phone calls, and trying to just get everything together. And I think I echo the same sentiment that everyone else has been conveying, is that it's unprecedented. 9/11 happened. I was up in New York, but even that was different because we could gather physically and we could comfort each other. So you had that at least. And this is a situation where there's been so much in the world that's changed. The iPhone was invented. We didn't have the iPhone 9/11. That came around. Technology has updated. We've become such a mobile world, such an online world now, that it's going to be very interesting going forward to see how people connect. I mean, personally, all my business has shifted. I don't expect a huge financial loss by the end of the year, just because of the way that I've positioned my own business. But I've had those conversations just both locally and nationally where people are closing shop. I know caterers who have been in business and they're closing. They can't weather this storm.
That's a good point. That's a good point. We're at a NACE event here. Right. We have had trouble today getting caterers or food and beverage managers to get on, because I have gotten calls every single day about, I've lost $1.5 million. I'm closing my business tomorrow. Caterers, the waiters. I mean, when you think about it, the food and beverage side of the business is the heart of what we do. They're the executors of our visions in many cases. And it is devastating what is going on. They not only do like 100 events a week, and we as planners sometimes do a few hundred a year at max. And so we have to really figure out how we're going to help them, I believe. What is your comments on that?
Yeah, it's been unbelievable. I actually, when I landed in Las Vegas last week, within my first 10 minutes at conference, I ran into a local caterer out of Virginia. She flagged me down, and I said, hey, and I don't want to call out her business, but I said, hey, how are you doing? She's like, I just laid off half my staff today. And and then later on to hear just caterer after caterer, to see in my news feed people closing shop. I think that it's going to be vital going forward of this. We've been moving forward in this direction of this cooperation over competition model in terms of event culture, where we're stopping all of that sort of that sort of backstabbish behavior that we've all it's either seen or had been exposed to. And I think going forward, we're just going to have to find a way to be more supportive. We have to understand that these are real people who are really losing their life, their life's work.
Yeah, I think we're in the prologue, not even in the beginning. And that is going to make a huge difference. Let's see, Colleen, talk about closures. I mean, we've had massive amounts of closures. Howard Theater is one of the iconic venues in Washington, D.C., and I think you're related to some of the New York venues as well. And tell us how you have been facing the closing of your organization as an example of what's going on in the mind of every venue.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the closure started about 2 weeks ago when, our artists started getting very nervous about getting on flights and wanting to travel anywhere in the US to have a show. So we started seeing shows getting postponed and canceled off, 2 weeks ago. Of course, then we follow the CDC recommendations and what our local health officials always recommend. And you saw the scope of what we were able to do, just shrink and shrink and shrink. And then ultimately have the mandate from the district to close the space indefinitely, and with a timeline that seems to keep continuously getting prolonged. So, the impact of that is really hard as, the director of sales to be able to give guidance to clients who are nervous about A, when are we going to be reopening? B, when are we going to feel safe to get in a group again and actually socialize? And C, when is this, going to become something that, they feel comfortable that the date's actually solid. So there's been, several things that are just really uncertain. And for us as a business, we're just kind of at a standstill. So, I shut down the venue when we got the order yesterday and kind of left it up into the community's hands to kind of be a eyesight on the space and make sure, it's taken care of. And, it's kind of a scary time to be, not operating, and we are, hoping that it will be a quick and easy turnaround, but the unknown is really what is hard for us as a business, because sure, none of our bills that stop just because the doors are locked. So that's kind of the hard piece of this.
Jeff, you have also had to close and readjust. What are the things that have hit you the most, and what are the toughest decisions you've had to make in the last few days?
The toughest decisions, honestly, right now is what are we going to do with the individual properties? Are we going to have to shut down properties and consolidate operations? We've already had to do that with restaurant operations, spa, fitness center, things like that. And obviously with the one of our properties, the hotel at the University of Maryland, being at the campus of the University of Maryland, when the campus closed early and spring break and elongated, all the supporting programs that went away, it's making those decisions in concert with your partners, in this case, the University, Prince George's community, College Park community, and doing what's best for your team members as well.
So what is the priority though? Is the priority, I mean, it's gonna shut down. How do you deal with the economics of this thing? Let's get right to the nub of it. People are afraid of being laid off. Everybody on this call is going to have an economic impact. Everybody that's listening to this call is going to have an economic impact in a big way. What do you do to survive is the big existential question.
What do you do personally? You start there.
Yeah, what?
You start there. You look at survival of the business, because in the long term, that's what's going to help your team members the most. If the business survives, you're going to be able to take care of the highest number of your team members. That the personal question is by far the most difficult, because when you're laying off, if there's no business, there's no rooms to clean. So you're in effect, whether you say, hey, you're technically laid off, or I just don't have any hours for you, you're out of work. And those decisions, some are made for you, but then what do you do for that total operation, and how economically do you survive? Are you shutting down floors? Are you closing the business? You're looking at everything from energy costs to you have your rent, you have your lease, you have your things that you have to pay. What do you do to save the money that you do have? But you always have to think of the people first, and how you can be a steward of your business, keeping within the culture, in our case, Southern Management, which is also large residential, organization as well, we have a very strong culture of taking care of our people. What does that mean? And economically, what are we able to do? And then also working with our partners, whether that's in the District of Columbia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, the different municipalities, what programs are out there for associate assistants, and making sure that you are communicating every step of the way. I can't say it enough that whether it was 9/11 or H1N1 or SARS or anything that I've been through the last 20 plus years in DC, making sure that you're communicating clearly and effectively to every one of your team members as often as possible is the best thing that you can do, because they have to know that you're working to try and recover whatever business is there and keep as many people working as possible.
How do you communicate the bad news?
Straightforward and honest.
But is it an email? Is it a call? Is it a group gathering? What's advice do you have for people who are listening to this on saying, okay, I have to lay off 25 people or 100 people or 1,000 people? What do you do? How do you do it?
You communicate as directly and personally as you can. You want to do it in person if you can, but with schedules you can't always. So you over communicate. It's a combination of phone calls by the managers, emails, follow-ups, and continuing to engage, whether it's human resources or your operations leaders. It's making sure you do your best to communicate personally to as many associates as you can to make sure they have awareness and assistance with all the resources that are available, be that unemployment, be it an employee assistance program, government program, or, in our case, looking, are there opportunities at our residential communities that associates may be able to use for their skills, because there's different needs at these residential communities than they've ever had before. And same thing with, with hotels. We're having to do things different than we've done. So can we retask and use more people than we otherwise would in different disciplines?
Trish, your same question about communications. As an event organizer, communication is very critical skill. What do you do? How do you do it today? And how do you communicate the good, the bad, and the ugly?
I think to echo Jeff's statement, honesty is key. I have, unfortunately for me, but fortunate for the situation, have been through 2 layoffs. Once when I was working with American Express Business Travel Services, and another one over at when I was working for a hotel in New York. So the lessons learned there have served me very, very well. And it's all about that. It's a matter of being as humane as possible. These are real people. You have to remember that these are real people who are going to really be affected by the decisions being made now, talking it through there with them. Sometimes you have to play a little bit of therapist, because the news is hard, and people are scared and they're unsure of what they're going to do. And relaying your personal best practices, I can help them, through my past experiences about how I got through the last 2 rounds of this, almost similar situation, and move forward from there. Just making sure that you're there as a resource and as a hand. And remember,
how do you do that? How do you do that? I mean, I guess in today's world, we have to walk people through the government assistance piece.
Right.
I mean, that seems to be the only solution right now, because they're not going to be getting another job anytime soon.
Right. And, this is really the time when, having multiple streams of income. I've always been a huge advocate of multiple streams of income for people, especially as a small business owner. I think that's pretty, important. And sometimes even something as simple as offering to form accountability groups, where people get on once a week and you talk about, what challenges you're facing. You call it a support group if you want to, you can't see them in person, right? Because that's obviously ill-advised at this point in time. But just making sure that you maintain those lines of communication with people, that you say, hey, listen, yes, this is about business, but it's about you and me. I'm here for you just because this financially, impacts us both, doesn't mean that I'm going to abandon you and run. I think that's what's really key, is that people have been, really used to being like abandoned by corporations, right? Just like cut loose and out into the field and have a nice life, and this is what you're going to do. And so to treat people with just that sense of humanity is going to, just be
Well, that's
paramount.
the hope. That is
Yeah.
the hope. Is it the
That is the
actual
hope.
reality of what's going to happen?
Right.
Because, when you have no cash,
Right.
it certainly is a very big decision maker,
Right.
in most cases. Colleen, talk about your communication structure. I mean, you look like the millennial among us, from what I can see.
Some good moisturizer.
You may not have been through a lot of the things that we've been through. It's shock therapy to a lot of people, especially your age. How do you think they're coping with the idea that things are not working? I mean, millennials think things work. All of a sudden, things are not working.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely is a culture shock to my colleagues of, the millennial group, just in that we've had it so good for so long, right? Like the industry has been booming. This year, as Trish mentioned, was one of the best on record, showing very promising. We've been hitting all of our goals. So, having this very serious and tragic, hurdle in our careers is definitely something that is shocking and I think maybe a little harder to reference. I worked through the 9/11 and 2008 financial crisis in a different capacity, but it definitely felt different. And I think, my communication to my colleagues and like talking it through, again, it doesn't feel permanent and the layoffs are temporary. And, my advice to them is that, this isn't because the company thinks you're doing a bad job. It's because they just cannot afford this right now. And it's not like they're not going to welcome you back with open arms as soon as possible. And that seems to set a better tone in, kind of building some sort of good faith in this, problem, and that we have an end in sight. But it definitely isn't easy to have that conversation with people who didn't do anything wrong to be let go, right? So that's a big thing to be, you're usually fired or let go because you're not hitting your numbers, or the business is going to bust, or you've done something wrong, or you're not doing a great job with your clients. And it's not the case for us right now, right? Like nobody did anything to deserve this. It's just happening. And that's the hardest thing to kind of come to terms with, I think. And kind of understanding that is kind of helpful, I think.
Well, the thing about your generation, which I love, is that you guys are innovators in many cases. Not that we are not, but the fact is that, you try to figure stuff out. And I have been very impressed I've been to a few groups of event organizers who are meeting every week on a Zoom call like this, and they're discussing options of how to work together so that we're becoming more cooperative, as someone said earlier. And some of the things that they're doing is that they're trying to share legal advice, for example, with other companies, other organizations, so that they can cut down on legal costs. They're trying to figure out contracts and understand how to lay people off humanely and do things like that, and understand the difference between furloughs and laying off and teams working together. They're also trying to team up to create ways to understand how you can get support for this from the government, and sort of, instead of just everyone investigating it on their own, that they're getting together as a group. So I would suggest that we create these task force of people to actually work together and be more cooperative. So what is that? Does that have some legs, do you think? Anybody?
I do. I definitely think it makes a lot of sense to continue that conversation. And I know, even to your point before about how often are we watching the news, I tend to be watching the updates every hour on the hour, only because I have clients from around the world with questions and concerns. And for me to understand what's happening in LA and, Washington State, and, what they're going through is maybe different than Washington, DC. At least I can be able to better give them some information. So sharing information like that with our community throughout the country is definitely important. I do conference calls with my girlfriends every day from around the country to be like, what's going on? How are you impacted? What can we do to support each other? And it's really helpful.
Stop there. What is going on with your call today with your girlfriends?
Well, there was a couple of tears going on, but it's a lot of confusion about where we were going to end up in a week, because last week felt very different than this week. So just kind of seeing who is quarantined at home, what they're doing. A lot of my girlfriends in the beverage industry are doing conference cocktails, where there's afternoon cocktails over a conference call, FaceTiming, which is really helping the morale and kind of giving us creative incentives to keep going. So that's what we're talking about. We're trying to get through it and figure out, where we are with this, what our bosses and companies are telling us, and how we can direct our clients to feel comfortable and safe. But yeah, that's the big cocktail conversation was what was happening today.
What's the first comment people make that when you get on? Like, what's the chatter? Because that's where we really understand what's going on.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, most everyone's just like, what just happened, right? It's just more of like, oh my God, today felt like a month ago yesterday. Like, it's definitely, that's what we talk about. It's just a whirlwind. It's just definitely like, we feel like we've aged a lot in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, good. You're joining me. Jeff, what were you saying? You had about to say something?
Well, I'll just say, what Colleen is saying, I think Trish said the same thing too, is, dealing with the associates and dealing with our team members and other partners in the industry, is that I think we're all pedaling in hope as well. And, everything that I've heard, everybody that I've talked to says it's a temporary thing. We don't know what the temporary is, but seeing Colleen's energy and Trish's energy, and we know we're going to come out of this. What is that new normal going to be like it was after 9/11? Is it going to ramp up? Is there going to be pent up demand? What are going to be the restrictions around that from the government? But I think everybody's trying to creatively figure out what is that, what's going to be the point where we can start doing what we do again. What's going to be that trigger, and trying to figure out what's that point that we're looking for? What's that piece of news that we're looking for that says, aha, I can point to it and say, okay, here's where it's starting to get better. And that's, I think, what we're talking with our team too.
Let me challenge this one thing too. Before we get into too much happy talk that things are going to get better, we may get a lot worse. So how do you redeploy our industry to help in the crisis? Do we create tented areas around hospitals and provide hospitality for visitors? What do we do that can re-energize our business and move it in a different direction to deal with the crisis, like what happened in World War II when people were converting all their industries? Has anyone had any thoughts on that? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for my part, I've always been fascinated by Jose Andres. I think he's an amazing human being. His work with World Central Kitchen is really admirable, to say the very least about it. And certainly what he's doing with his restaurants locally in terms of converting those into food pantries and food kitchens for people is it's a wonderful direction for our industry. So I think it's looking to our leaders and seeing what they're doing, and offering our services where we can, right? Because me at the best of what I do is I consult with my clients on making the best decisions for their events. So obviously that's not going to be really like a hot ticket over the next couple of weeks. But I can lift this table. I can cut chicken. I can ladle some soup. I can hand out blankets. So sometimes it's just remembering that all these things that these thought leaders in our industry are doing are going to take labor, and being that labor.
Well, the thing is, though, we can do it as this group alone, NACE, for example.
Right.
We should be having a task force tomorrow to sit around and how do we deploy our services should this thing get really bad. The restaurant industry in Washington, D.C. seems to be doing a great job of reinventing itself as well. I just saw somebody created a tip jar Google Doc so people can give their favorite waiters tips so that they can actually pay to live for the next few months. And so I thought that was a genius move. They're doing curbside delivery, which caterers are starting to do. There's a lot of innovation that is happening, and I don't think we're there yet in terms of maximizing it. I mean, from crisis comes opportunity is the old Chinese proverb, right? So we have to really not think of ourselves as just the chamber of commerce for the industry, but the chamber of commerce for society. And so we have a responsibility. Yes, we can tell people, oh, we're not going to give you back your cancellations and things like that. But right now, I think we're going to have to bring our shirt sleeves up and just dig in. Any comments on that? Colleen, what would you guys do at the Howard Theater to convert it into a something to help what's going on?
Yeah, we actually had that conversation today with my colleagues in the building, and we talked about, such a historic theater that's so important to the community, that is a community that's going to be really in desperate need of support, and something that we can offer. It's just coming up with ways that we can either provide. We have a giant catering kitchen and the venue, so if there is a partner we can link up with and figure out a way to give out meals from the venue in a safe way. I know the big thing is, again, the social distancing and how we're not, can't just have a big group fundraiser in the space. And so how do we do this following the rules and making sure everyone's still safe? So, a lot of brainstorming still needs to be done on that, because I think this is a way that it's unprecedented for our community to come up with a problem solving that doesn't involve all of us coming together. So, well, that is definitely, we're thinking about it and we're trying to figure out.
Did you have a formal brainstormer? Is step one to have a formal brainstormer on what to do?
I think that is a great idea.
Okay, everyone do that. Trish, what are you guys going to do? What is your immediate circle doing?
Yeah, as far as the board for the DC of NACE, I've been giving everybody some breathing room over the last couple of days. Obviously, it's a gut punch, right? Like everyone, we're all a board of volunteers, and we all have regular businesses to sort of get through and to attend to. So one by one, I've been reaching out just to sort of, get their temperature. Where are they at in terms of their own situation? And I think that once the dust settles just a little bit, we'll again convene probably within the next week. NACE National is going to be meeting tomorrow. They're also doing a live webinar where they're going to be addressing membership questions and different things like that. So, looking to national leadership, get some inspiration from them, and then just move forward. The one thing I've always said about DC is that, we have an amazing pool of talent in this area. We suffer for lack of nothing. There isn't a single segment in this industry that we don't have experts in, and that's all based locally. So I'm sure that with the amount of talent that we have, we'll be able to come up with something really, really great. We did already have some things on the books for later this year. So that might mean pivoting a couple of those events and just creating them, and putting that spin on it from the current situation.
Let's get into one last issue that I think would make sense, and that is the cancellation dilemma. The idea that you have canceled your event, do you get your money back? Do you not get your money back? I have had numbers of conversations with people that said, we're sticking to our contract. Now, on the other side, they may not even have the cash to pay you. What do you do? How hard ass do you get? How do you become flexible? What are your solutions? Jeff, you want to? Go ahead, Jeff. You want to start?
Yeah, I think what we've done is we look for windows, right? We're trying to look with what's happening in the short term and medium term, and obviously flexibility is key, and partnering with your clients is just as important. Yes, we have contracts. This event goes kind of beyond contracts. Is it force majeure? Is it not force majeure? The thing we want to do is avoid legalese. Hospitality is just that. It's a partnership. Yeah, there's a contractual requirement, but where are we right now? We know that for the next 3 or 4 weeks, nothing is happening. CDC guidelines, all these gatherings, we want to be flexible with our teams. So we've offered rescheduling and moving for no penalty. If groups have had to cancel because it's directly impacted by COVID, then we're allowing them to cancel. Now for groups for May forward, right now we're saying we're going to work with you, but we can't make the decision now because we don't know what's going to happen in May. But for now through mid-April, we've been completely flexible and transparent with our guests. At the beginning, it was a week or so ago was we'll deal with March. Now we're into early April as things continue to progress. And I think being flexible, being honest, and if we make a change and being able to go back, if something that you charge somebody and now you're not going to be able to go back and make it right with that client, you do that. Again, each case, you have to look at it, case by case. There is not a broad brush you can paint with this right now because school groups are very different than legal groups, are different than associations that are different than pretty much everything else that you will deal with. And again, it's keeping in with the culture of your organization and within the structure of what's going on. Because unlike 9/11, a lot of things, every state and every municipality is handling this a little bit different. Virginia's restaurant rules are very different than DC's, which are different than Maryland's, which are different than Pennsylvania. And even within states, you have San Francisco that's handling it very different than Philadelphia. So each property, each group has to make the decisions they need to from a cancellation or a reschedule as true as they can based on their culture. And I think it was, actually both Colleen and Trish were saying, as you're dealing with groups and people being uncomfortable with traveling and making changes, flexibility is absolutely key. And, it at some point it's going to come back. It took us 5 years to recover from the downturn to get average rates back to where they were in 08 and 09. Do I think it'll take that long this time? Maybe. It all depends on what those restrictions are and what the fear factor is as we overcome it. It goes back to consumer confidence. And I think consumers are going to be confident coming back to the people that treated them fairly. That doesn't necessarily mean forgiving everything. If they're insisting on canceling for a June program, or I can't do that now, I may charge a cancellation. But if we're fair and something comes up at June and we hold it or we give it back, we apply it, then I think as long as we can look ourselves in the mirror and look at our clients and saying we're doing the best we can with the information that we have at the time, and we're willing to, work with our clients, I think we'll be better in the long run. That's going to help the business. It's going to help the teams. And that's where people are going to come back to. They're going to come back to groups and organizations that dealt with them fairly, because nobody really knows right now. So I think that's key.
Right, Trish, what is your sort of sense of this issue?
Just to, kind of somewhere similarity with what Jeff was saying in terms of working with people and being fair. I know from my perspective, last year I put in a clause in all of my contracts stating that my clients are required to carry event insurance with me going forward, just because there were other events that had canceled for whatever miscellaneous reasons in the past. And I've been in communication with all of my clients going forward about cancellations, moving forward, reaccommodating and restructuring their events. And so you try to be as flexible as people can, but people are going to remember. People are going to remember your brand for how you treated them now, and having the right policy, because I too have heard people who have been super, hardline and say, no, you paid us 25%, or we're not refunding, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. And I don't think that's very good strategic long-term thinking. You have to think of your business right now as the long game. It's really, you're dealing with short-term triage.
What if you can't? What if you're about to go out of business?
Right.
And you're desperate. What do they do?
That's you have to ask yourself, what does that future look like for you? Do you have it within yourself to ride out the storm, to weather the storm? And if you don't, then I think being fair is the best way to go. If you're not out hard inventory, if you're not a caterer who already purchased food, if you're not a decorator who already purchased floral, if what you are is a venue and you had to close doors, or you're an event planner and you're giving up your consultation fees, that's not a horrible position to be in the grand scheme of things. You can ride that out. You can figure that out. It's when you start having hard costs that becomes an issue. You've already paid for labor, you've already paid for the product, and now this event is costing you money. And I think being honest and transparent with clients as they come in is going to be key in working that out. I think that most clients, from what I've heard, once they understand that the money has already been paid on their behalf, figure out a way. They'll figure out a way to compensate the company for their losses, or at least compensate them in some way. Because do you want to be out as a small business owner? No, but in some circumstances, when you're not dealing with a corporate client, what you're dealing with is a wedding that essentially have their dreams squashed. So you have to treat that with kid gloves, or you're dealing with a birthday party, you're dealing with whatever social gathering. We're right in the middle of mitzvah season, And, fortunately, all of my clients got in just before, but I have heard from multiple people over the next, 3 or 4 weeks that all of these events where people are spending up to $100,000 are, essentially just, non-starter. And so it's finding a way to keep yourself afloat.
That's the key. The key thing.
That's the key.
There's 100. In the last report I saw, there's about 130,000 catering organizations in America, and with about a $12 billion revenue number and a $1 billion profit line.
Right.
I think that has been devastated. Yeah, those are not current numbers either.
Right.
And I think that we're in a whole different world. Colleen, do you have any comments on that? On the deposit and the refund side?
I mean, to echo Trish and Jeff, I mean, we're trying to be as flexible as we possibly can, right? I mean, we're not in a position where we're making the rules at this point. It's coming from the government. So we need to follow along with the guidelines. We've been in a fortunate situation that our clients are able to postpone. So we haven't really had to have that hard conversation. I'm sure it'll happen at some point if this continues. My guidance to our contracts that are nervous about May, June, July is let's wait and see. Like, I don't want to take a deposit in a contract maybe until we're a little bit more comfortable with the climate and we know for sure the event is happening, and kind of outlining a different deposit structure where we're paying less upfront and we're maybe in a payment plan situation. And this is case by case with each of our clients, but I want to make sure that once they know the deposit's paid and when it's non-refundable, it's not a surprise at this point, because we have a plan in action to kind of get things going. So being creative a little bit with your payment plan structured, how the contracts are maybe worded, getting temperature checks about what's going on in the world is the way that I've been kind of able to help a client feel a little bit less nervous about something that they're really unsure about.
I've heard that there's some ideas out there about creating sort of a gift card program, so that instead of giving refunds, you give, here's a gift card for the amount of money. So at least you know the money's going to be spent with you. So any innovation is really, really good.
Absolutely.
Does anyone? I thought it would be good to everyone have a final comment on what they think the future will be, and probably I think that we've gone long enough on a webinar or a podcast, whatever this is going to be. And I think that we would want to get feedback from people. So hopefully there'll be a button on here to give us your ideas and respond to what we're talking about. So Jeff, do you want to give a start on your final wrap-up comments?
Yeah, I think overall we're generally hopeful. We're launching a program next week at all of our properties called Project 40. And that is our initiative to get our team members back to 40 hours a week. It kind of goes to your point earlier. What can we do from an innovative standpoint to figure out a way to get our teams back and working, whether that's at our residential communities, partnering with hospitals, public entities, things that are going to be stretched as this crisis continues. How can we lend our expertise to others so that we can get our team back and working, and then as our business comes back, get everybody back that we've had to lay off or change or shift operations. So we're hopeful, and that's why we're launching that as we continue to work through this crisis. And again, I'm hopeful overall for the business, because I think the lifeblood of our country, and it is commerce and bringing people together and meeting, whether that's events, social or business or whatever. We have to get back, people will have to get back together, and we'll start with small groups and travel and people seeing family. And I think that's where it's going to start. And as that continues to go, I'm hopeful that we'll continue to see that business recover fairly steadily as the summer continues. That's my optimistic view. And from a pragmatic view, we're going to do everything we can to support our teams through that process.
Trish?
So for my part, I had a long, hard think to myself, like, what does my future kind of look like in the next 3, 6, and 9 months? And I had already been moving towards online solutions and incorporating, sort of the web world into my business structure to begin with. But I think bottom line, is that, weddings are still going to happen. People are still going to meet. It might not be today, but it will happen eventually. I think that the worst thing that we can do is to hang on to the way things have been done. I think remaining a sense of flexibility within your own thinking, within your own business structure, within your own approach to your brand is going to be key. I mean, I saw so many businesses in 2008 and 9/11 cling to, past practice and get so frustrated when the past practice wasn't working anymore, that they essentially aged themselves out of business. Like, if you can't keep up with the times, if you can't automate, you will die. So it's automate or die. So the key is staying on top of trends, maintaining relevance, and being flexible, but not only in terms of the business structure, but even in your own mindset and in your own heart. That's going to be very key.
Colleen?
I'm hopeful. I mean, I know music is a universal unifier, right? So I'm hoping that our concert schedule will come back robust. People are going to want to come out and celebrate and be together and be in a community moment. Our concerts, are definitely such an important part of the DNA of Washington, D.C. So I'm excited and hopeful that we're going to see that come back stronger than ever. And I think the event side of it is the same, where people are going to want to celebrate that we survived this and that we're back together. We want to get together and celebrate life and, each other, and kind of, companies are going to want to see each other again. So that's going to be a fun thing to hopefully see an uptick. And, hopefully that'll just kind of spiral and we'll just have a really fun fall and a really hefty programming schedule. So
Great. Well, let me wrap up with a couple words, and then we'll sort of call it a day. I believe that while I'm not optimistic about the next few weeks, I am very optimistic about the future of our industry, because if you notice, with all of the press, what's the number one thing that people focused on were these cancellations of events and how important they were to the world. And I think that message got out in an effective way, and that people realize how important and how part of the infrastructure this is. Yes, we will have to innovate, find new ways to gather, but just the oxytocin exchange at live events is not going to be changing. People are going to need to gather. After 9/11 and after the recession, people cut budgets, they stopped things, and all of a sudden no one knew anyone. People didn't know informally who people were. So I think it's important that will happen. I think it's going to come back strong once it's healthy to gather. I think that our industry is going to have to be more cooperative. I believe that all event organizers have to be collaboration artists more than they are just event organizers. It's okay, they expect everything to work properly, but how do you get people to make an enriching experience, and how do you create ideas out of when people gather that change the world? And I think that is what the future of our business is going to be. How do you make our event organizers collaboration artists, and our caterers, and our hotels, centers where people innovate and talk to each other to change the world in better ways? I do think that even on the side of event organizers getting together and forming coalitions, working together, big venues are going to consolidate because it's going to be easier to do that. You're going to see a lot of investment in new venues, in companies or the people that can create larger organizations, so they don't ever have to depend on being small. Is going to be tough. I think it's going to be tougher to be small. So I think that you're going to see a large consolidation of people working together in ways that we haven't even thought of yet. And with that, I would love to continue. Thank you, NACE, for hosting this webinar, and thank you all the panelists for attending and being part of it. It is a tough time to do this. Thank you for your service. I think we're all now about service to our fellow man, or fellow women, or everything. And we have to think about people first. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate everyone being on the call today, and I wish everyone the best of luck in the next few weeks and months.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.